Hi there, welcome back to my channel. So in my last video, I talked about 4 things that I recently implemented to help me live more happily and more peacefully, and one of those things was getting off Instagram. And so today I'm going to be talking to you in a little bit more detail about breaking up with Instagram and Facebook. So before I launch into it, I'll just start off by saying that I think it's kind of a situation where it's like never say never. It's not like I'm never going to go back onto these platforms, and I don't think that those social media platforms are inherently bad. I think that just for the stage that I'm at in my life, they weren't adding a whole lot of value and positivity. So I decided to give myself a break, and I just wanted to share my experience with you all. So firstly, I'm going to be talking about 5 reasons why I made the decision to get off those platforms, and then I'll finish off by giving you an update on how life has been after social media. So the first reason why I decided to get off Instagram and Facebook was because I felt like I started to lose my own individuality and creativity as well. So I started paying more attention to what other people were doing in their lives, whether that's the places they were hanging out, how they were running their business, the clothes they were wearing, and how they designed their homes. I was just a lot more focused on the way that other people were living rather than just tuning into the things that I really like and what my style is, what's important for me, what my definition of success is, and so on and so forth. The really interesting thing is that I guess throughout my 20s, it was a period of self-discovery, and I've always really struggled to find out what my taste is when it comes to things like my clothes and my style, and also the way that I design my home. And the first thing that I noticed is after a period of getting off Instagram and Facebook, particularly Instagram, I started to notice my own tastes emerge. So I was a little bit more bold when it came to picking furniture pieces for my place, or I was a bit more intentional when it came to shopping for clothes. And I think I had a better understanding of my style, and I could articulate better the things that I liked and the things that I didn't like. Whereas when I was on Instagram, those thoughts were very clouded, and I just kept thinking, oh, this looks picture perfect on Instagram. I guess I like that. I guess that's what I like. Rather than kind of taking a step back and just letting my creativity flow out and then getting to know myself that way. So right now I still use things like YouTube, obviously, and I have Pinterest boards for inspiration, but my first instinct is to check in with myself. And when I see something, see an image or whatever it might be an image of how someone's designed their home, the first thing that I tend to do now is ask myself, how does that make me feel? Does that kind of style resonate with me? Is it even realistic? Like when I'm picking clothes, I'm like, would I wear heels all the time? I'm looking more at my own life circumstances and my personality and how I like to live my life before making decisions about things. The second thing I started to notice was that I was living my life through a screen. I was feeling out of touch with reality and not very mindful and present in my day-to-day life. And of course, everything online, especially on a platform like Instagram, is always so curated and edited. And I think it subconsciously made me feel like my life had to always look perfect and be perfect in a weird way. The other interesting thing I noticed is that I was living vicariously through other people. So it's this weird thing where if I see someone doing something that I want to do, it's like my brain has a hit of dopamine, and I think I've done that thing myself. So it's much easier to kind of sit there on the couch and watch someone build their business and post a YouTube video and work on the things they want to work on, rather than doing it or taking the time to do that myself. And particularly on Facebook, I found that I was mindlessly scrolling through my feed, even though there was nothing particularly that was adding value to my life. I think it was more just a form of quick entertainment, and yeah, it just didn't add any value to my life. Even to the point where, particularly when things felt uncomfortable, or there was a task that I was doing that was a bit more challenging, or just a situation that I wasn't feeling 100% comfortable, I would open Facebook and kind of just distract myself from dealing with that thing in my reality. So basically, I was just spending more time distracting myself, watching other people do things that I wanted to do, rather than taking action in my own life to achieve the goals that I wanted to achieve. Speaking of goals, the third thing that I noticed was that being on social media delayed the achievement of my goals. In my last video, I talked about wanting to produce more content than I consume now that I'm not on social media. So basically when I was on it, I felt like I was just always consuming lots and lots of information, details, whatever it was, and it just made me feel really overwhelmed. And because I was feeling overwhelmed, it made me not take as much action as I could have on things that really mattered to me. During COVID, at least here in Melbourne, Australia, we had like 7 lockdowns. So we had a lot of time indoors, everything being shut. We had a lot of spare time to focus on things. So that was that wasn't too difficult for me to kind of, work on my business and things like that. But then as life gradually started getting back to normal, things started opening up again and there were more things competing for my time. That's when I found it really difficult to prioritize my time and use my time wisely on things that were important. And now, without the distraction of social media, I feel like I am just planning out my days more intentionally. So for example, I'm setting aside 30 minutes every day to work on my YouTube channel after I finish my 9-to-5 job. I'm waking up earlier to exercise in the morning because I notice the really positive impacts it has on my mental health, and it just sets my day up for success really well. So I'm doing small things every day that are, I think, having a compounding effect. Classic concept from Atomic Habits by James Clear. I know I've mentioned this before. I'm going to mention it again because it's one of my favorite books. So if you haven't read it, read it. It's just a really good way of, practically and logically looking at taking small steps to get to where you want to be. The fourth thing that happened was that I felt like social media really drained my energy. Particularly when I was on Instagram, I was consuming a lot of short form content, and Jenna put this in a really, really great way where she said that short form content feels like a chip packet, like eating snacks. The first few are really delicious, but the more you eat, the more kind of groggy you feel and sluggish. And if you finish a whole bag, you just feel really shit about yourself. So at times I felt like I was filling my brain with a lot of useless content, and this was particularly with Facebook. It wasn't anything that was really educational. It was more just short bursts of entertainment that didn't add any value to my life. So yeah, and this really drained my mental energy over time. The final thing I thought it did was also really increase my anxiety levels. I couldn't help just comparing myself to other people. Even though I knew that that was not a good thing to do, it happened anyway. And it also kind of inflated my ego a little bit. Like, I've always really enjoyed things like content creation, like I've said before, and making things look really pretty and all that, but it just sometimes felt like I was living 2 lives. So I was trying to be really mindful and present in the 3D world, in the reality, but then I was also trying to curate this really aesthetic life on my social profiles. And sometimes it felt like being a fraud. So like, let's be real here. We all post the best bits of our days and the best bits of the events that we attend and the places that we go to. Like one time, me, Richard and Leo went to a winery, and Leo was just a puppy then. And I mean, if you've raised a puppy before, you know how challenging they can be. And there were moments where he was pulling and like trying to eat leaves and things like that, and it just wasn't a super relaxing day. But obviously, rather than sharing that part, I shared the cheese board, the view, the wine, and it just made me feel not very authentic at times. So after I've gotten off Facebook and Instagram, what has my life actually been like? I've noticed 3 distinct phases. The first one I call the determination, the second one the challenge, and then the third one the new normal. So in the first phase, I called it the determination because it was filled with positivity. I felt like I was going on a juice detox or something, and I was getting rid of something that was really negative in my life, and I felt really motivated to do it well and, explore my creativity, do a lot of self-discovery. It was just really positive. I was proud of myself for making a difficult decision to not be on social media, especially when a lot of people around me are still on those platforms and still using them. And so yeah, I wanted to make this into a really healthy and positive experience for myself. Then came phase 2, which was the challenge. So the challenge came when I started to get bored. It's funny because I grew up in a time where we didn't have social media. When I was a kid, when I was bored, I used to do things like create scrapbooks, and I wrote stories, and I blogged and took photos and things like that. This probably kicked in a few months after I got off social media. I started to notice that I was getting bored, and then I was a little bit restless. I guess I became confronted with certain things in my life. I had a lot of questions about where my life was headed because I had all this time to do all this reflection. So some of the questions I started asking myself was, am I happy with my career trajectory? Where's my health at? What do I want to achieve in the next 5 to 10 years? What actions am I putting off now that's going to have major consequences in the next few years? Am I doing enough to create the life I want to live? How have my priorities changed over the last few years? And did what made me happy back then still make me happy now? So very deep and meaningful, lots of questions, lots of reflection, and I found it a little bit challenging. So after all of that, I'm really happy to say that I'm in the phase of the new normal. So sometimes I still have this inclination to really want to share things, but I guess not share it like straight away and with a whole lot of people on social media. I think I'm more focused on capturing the memories, capturing the moment for myself and for people that I love, rather than, it's actually more about capturing the experience rather than sharing the experience. And when it does come to capturing my experiences, particularly when taking photos, I think it's more intentional in the way that I do it and less in like a short-term happiness, ego-driven way. I'm also feeling more confident in who I am as a person and my values, and I'm really taking life at a slower pace. I used to like do things like, for example, wash the dishes, and I'd be like, oh, I've got to hurry up and get this done because I don't enjoy this. But now I'm just like, you know what? Dishes need to be washed and I want to do it properly so that they're nice and clean. So I'm just going to take my time and do it, I'm slowing down a lot more. I'm also feeling more confident about who I am as a person, and I am confident about my values and how I want to show up in the world, but also how I want to show up for myself. Speaking of showing up for myself, in my next video, I'm going to share with you some key habits that I have started tracking for myself that I make sure I get to every day to really look after my mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual health. They're ways that I really like to show up for myself to make sure that I am looking after my well-being and I'm bringing the best of myself to work, to my relationships, and So I'm really excited to share that with you. Keep an eye out for the next video. If you haven't subscribed, hit the subscribe button so you know when I'm posting next. And I will love you and leave you here. I'll see you in my next video. Bye.